with the Wolf. We just finished up on the Titans 2018 draft. Four-member draft class. It's the smallest in franchise history. Um, Not a lot of guys, but I think John Robinson talked about picking quantity or quality over quantity, and it's a little change from what they normally do. It's a class that they traded up three different times to get their guy. Started with Rashawn Evans, then they moved on to Harold Landry, and then today Dane Cruikshank. All three guys that they traded up to nab, guys that they targeted early, and it didn't feel like they were supposed to be on the board when they were. So they went up and got them. So as always, we'll chat. You guys ask questions, and we'll fire away. My early reaction to the draft class is that this is a team that's drafting like they believe they're contenders. They're contenders to not only make the playoffs but make some noise this season. Oftentimes, teams that are on the brink are willing to move up and sacrifice picks to get guys that fit their scheme to fit specific roles, and that's what John Robinson did today. He joked that they're good friends with Baltimore after they traded up twice with Baltimore. Um, First to get Rashawn Evans, who the Steelers were actually going to trade up and get, but the Baltimore Ravens gave him a little insight and said, "Hey, you know, you might want to come up and get this guy if you want him." And the Titans went up and got him. That started with Evans, and then today they traded up with him to get Cruikshank. So I think that um, we're going to see the Titans sign probably anywhere from 10 to 15 undrafted free agents in the next day or so, and that's really going to be their way to upgrade the roster and fill out things from a numbers perspective. So someone's asking if Evans is an upgrade over Williamson. I believe so. He's got to prove it on the field. He's a rookie. Williamson obviously was a fourth-year player, and he had been more accomplished in this league. But I think Evans can be one of the best linebackers, particularly off-ball linebackers that this franchise ever had. He reminds me, or I think he can be the C.J. Mosley of this defense. And I tweeted about this yesterday. I walked past Titans defensive coordinator Dean Pease shortly after they drafted Evans, and he sort of had a smirk on his face, and there was sort of a "I got my guy" type of smirk. And he had C.J. Mosley in Baltimore over the last four seasons. And he's a guy who can really be that command guy in the middle, who takes over the vocal element of the team, and he also presents that sideline to sideline ability to cover, to stop the run, and to keep everybody in check. So I think Evans was a really strong pick. Off the ball linebackers often don't go high in the draft, but if you get a guy like Evans, you get a guy who can be the centerpiece, the rock of your defense for years to come. So I'm really high on Evans. I think he could end up being a defensive player of the year candidate in Tennessee. I think he's going to be a day one starter opposite Wesley Woodyard. And I think you get in a situation where you have a lot of depth in that linebacker position. So three down linebacker, guy who can stuff the run, who can hit, and who can cover in the pass game. So I think it's a home run pick. But obviously he's got to do well on the field, and he's got to stay healthy. That's really the only real knock on him, the health element. So let's see what we got. What do you know about Cruikshank? Is he expected to push Cyprian for a spot? Yes, I actually have a little background on Cruikshank. I covered a guy named Will Parks out in Denver who actually groomed, I guess, Cruikshank before he went to the NFL, and Cruikshank eventually took his position. He played sort of what they call that spur safety role, and what that is basically he played almost exclusively in the box, but he was sort of a slot corner slash linebacker, and it's an interesting position because it helped him become a strong tackler, but he also had a lot of experience covering receivers, covering safeties, covering running backs, and that helps his versatility as they move on to the NFL. So I think that the Titans are going to have him play safety, and but I think he could be a guy that gets playing time in a dime package, and that could be his way to get on the field early. I don't think he'll push Cyprian in year one. Nothing would surprise me, particularly because I think Cyprian is now the weak point in what is growing to be a strong defense. But I think he could eventually push Cyprian, maybe 2019. The only reason why I don't think he'll do it this season is because he's a little raw. He hasn't had a lot of playing experience, particularly at safety. He hasn't played a lot of safety at all. He's more been a linebacker, sort of corner guy. So to ask a guy who hasn't played safety to start in year one as a rookie, as a fifth round pick, is a really tall task. So I think his better bet is to win that third safety job. And like I mentioned, to play in that dime package and obviously be an impact player in special teams. So that's really where I see him making his role. But I think it's a good pick. They traded up to get him. He's a guy they brought in for a pre-draft visit, so obviously they liked him. And you had a guy like Kevin Byard who was drafted in the third round 2 years ago. Didn't start, to that back end of his rookie year, and eventually became, what we know now in the second year. So not saying Crookshank will be that same player. He'd be lucky to have that ascension, but you never know with safeties, and I think that Crookshank could eventually be a starter in this defense. Let's see. I think Evans can be an upgrade of Williamson. The only thing is that rookies, a lot of the expectations, a lot of the pressures get to a lot of rookies. So you can't assume that just because it's on paper to have a good season that they will. Corey Davis was supposed to be the Titans' number 1 receiver. Injuries happened. He got banged up. He didn't really get to learn the offense, and he ended up being sort of the number 3 receiver by the season's end. So I think you just have to be careful. But if he does what the Titans think he can do, then I think he can be that impact player and upgrade over Avery Williamson, who, by the way, got $7 or $8 million a year in free agency. So if you're able to replace a $7 to $8 million a year player in free agency with an upgrade with a rookie, then I think that's a win for John Robinson and the Titans moving forward. What do you need to know about the 2 linebackers? I think I talked about it a little bit with Rashaan Evans. I think Rashaan Evans is going to be your leader in the defense. Your eventual, I know Wesley Woodyard has played that role, but I think whether this season or next season, I think that role will belong to Rashaan Evans. He'll be the C.J. Mosley of the defense, in my opinion, and I think he's going to be a guy who ends up being one of your core building blocks. I think Kevin Byard's your leader in that secondary. Jarrell Casey's your leader in that defensive line, and I think Rashaan Evans will end up being that leader in that middle level, I guess the linebacker level per se. And, you've got an aging front 7 with a bunch of leaders in Brian Arakpo, Wesley Woodyard, and Derek Morgan, but they're all entering the final year of their contract. So I think this is a time where you see the Titans transition from some of their old leaders like Arakpo, Morgan, and Woodyard, and some of the new leaders coming up like Evans and Kevin Byard, and also Logan Ryan. So I think you see that sort of transition in the next year or two. Obviously, Morgan, Rack, and Woodyard are going to be here, and maybe they last past their contract. But I think you see sort of the transition of building towards a contender while also creating a team of the future with Mike Vrabel in command. So that's my take on that. With Harold Landry, we haven't talked about him a lot in this video, but I think Harold Landry could end up being possibly the best player in this class. And that's saying a lot because I think Rashaan Evans will be really good. But I think Landry, he plays a premium position, and I was shocked that he was still on the board. John Robinson told me that he was a guy they considered at number 25, and they were potentially going to take him if Rashaan Evans was off the board. He was there at 41. They traded up to get him, gave up a 3rd-round pick for him. He's a guy who one scout told me that he was the 2nd-best edge rusher in this class behind Bradley Chubb. And Bradley Chubb went 5th overall to the Broncos. So he has a great bend. He has elite athleticism. He's a guy who is a really, really pure pass rusher. The knock on him is his run defense and his ability to set the edge. And then there were some injury concerns because he was banged up his senior year season. John Robinson said that he checked out medically and he believed that he was good. Harold Landry said that he was 100%. So I think he's good on that department. As far as the run defense, Robinson said they weren't worried about that. So I think it won't be a problem in year one because I think ideally you have Morgan and Arakpo as your starters, and then you have Landry coming off the bench as sort of your super reserve, your D Ford who played probably more than half of the snaps, but he doesn't start. And you may see a guy who can get 6, 8, 10 sacks a game. And the Titans are lacking that. They had a decent pass rush, but they've lacked that one guy who can change the game, who can threaten offensive tackles with his pass rush. And I think Harold Landry can potentially be that guy. So I think the Titans should be really excited about their first 2 picks. I know a lot of fans are probably bummed out they only got 4 picks, but it's sort of a good team problem. A lot of times you have all these picks, guys aren't going to make the team. I had that a lot of times with Denver where they draft 8 guys and only 4, 5, or 6 of them made the team. And you feel like you're wasting picks because you have to cut guys that end up going to other teams. So 4 picks, all 4 of those guys are probably going to make the team. And they're probably all going to have, probably not Luke Falk, but 3 of the 4 probably are all going to have some impact in 2018. So I think that's a win for the Titans, and I think that's a win for those guys as well. I talked about Dane. I talked about Landry. On his 2017 season, he was banged up that whole year. I think he had an ankle injury. He had some other stuff going on. He didn't look anywhere near the player, and it actually ended up working out to the Titans' benefit. He probably would have been a top 10 pick had he came out in the 2017 draft. He was that good. 16 and a half sacks as a junior in 2016. And then, like you mentioned, tough 2017 season. I think he only had 5 sacks, banged up, didn't look like the same player. So you're betting on getting the 2016 version of Harold Landry. If you get the 2017 version of Harold Landry and that's your player, then you're probably disappointed with your pick. But you're hoping that you get that 2016 version and he can be a really good pass rusher. So I'm not sure if injuries were the whole reason of why he had a rough 2017, but the Titans are betting on him being the player he was before the injury-prone senior year. Lewis, I like Falk a lot. Do you think he will be our number 2 this year, or will he take time to groom? That's something I just asked John Robinson right here at the podium when he had his draft closeout press conference. And he said first he'll have to compete for a spot on the 53-man roster. So I look at it as a situation where Luke Falk's more of a developmental quarterback. I think ideally you see the Titans keep 3 quarterbacks on their roster this season. And Blaine Gabbert, your number 2. Luke Falk develops as your number 3. Obviously, Luke Falk's coming from more of an air raid Washington State offense, so it may take a little bit more time for him to transition to the pro-style offense or whatever Matt LaFleur ends up running out here in Tennessee. Even if they run a little bit more of a spread, it's different than the air raid they ran in Washington State, where it's almost exclusively shotgun. You're running 70 passes a game, and DBs are letting your guys run free. So I think Falk in the 6th round is a really good value. I think it was really smart of the Titans to draft a quarterback. I know a lot of folks are like, why are you drafting a quarterback? You got to mark. And, you only got 4 picks, but I think it's really smart because it's the most valuable position on the team. It still feels like every year they're looking for backup quarterbacks. They had Matt Castle, which was a disaster over the last couple of years, being their number 2 quarterback. Not because he was a bad guy. He was a great guy. He just was too old to be counted on if Mariota got hurt. And as we know, Mariota has missed a game in each of his first 3 seasons. So you need a guy who can potentially be that guy long term. So I think Luke Falk could be a guy who sticks with Mariota his entire career as a backup until he, maybe he elevates and becomes a starter elsewhere. But I think it's a really smart pick. I think he's a guy that can work with Matt LaFleur and work with Pat O'Hara to be groomed. But I don't expect him to be the number 2 quarterback this season. So what's your thoughts on Kevin Dodd with the pick of Harold Landry? I mean, here's my thing on Kevin Dodd. If you get anything out of Kevin Dodd in 2018, you'll take it. I'm not sure Kevin Dodd makes his roster. We haven't seen anything out of Kevin Dodd over his first 2 seasons to give me confidence that he's going to be an impact player this season or ever. A lot of guys have that year 3 turnaround where they become a player. If Dodd does, great for him, great for the Titans. You have another pass rusher, but I think you have to go into 2018 expecting Derek Morgan, Brian Arakpo, and Harold Landry to be your top three outside linebackers, and moving forward towards that. So I think that's how I look at it. I think Dodd, will get another chance under this scheme. Mike Vrabel talked about being high on giving Dodd another chance. So maybe a new scheme helps him, but I wouldn't cross my fingers just off what I saw. But that's just my take. I'll take a few more and then get out of here. It's a nice Saturday, so I'm going to go ahead and enjoy it while the draft's over. I'll probably, if you check out ESPN.com, check out my Twitter feed. I wrote a few stories. I put analysis up of all four of the Titans picks. That'll give you a breakdown of exactly what, I think of each pick. Think of how they traded up and got them and how they fit with the team. So that's a good resource for you. I also wrote a story on Luke Falk, and who sort of idolized Tom Brady and actually got picked at that Tom Brady selection. So it's a cool story of just, the sort of pressure that's going to be on Luke Falk now at that pick, but also sort of the coincident ties that come into a player being picked at 199. So check those out. I'll answer a few more, and then we'll head out of here. As always, thanks guys for watching this Howling with the Wolf thing that I do. Yeah. So, Cameron, what do you think of our receiving core? I think that's one of the biggest remaining question marks. Are the Titans going to be making another move at receiver, or are they satisfied with what they have? I think the fact that they didn't draft a receiver is a big vote of confidence for Corey Davis, for Taywan Taylor, for Tajay Sharp. Guys that haven't really proven a ton, particularly last season, but they were all drafted players over the last 2 seasons. I think John Robinson is really high on those players becoming good players in the scheme. I think they think that Corey Davis can really become a number one season with a full off season, full development with the coaching staff, and plenty of time with Mariota. So I know that the Titans believe that Corey Davis will have one of, if not the biggest jump of any player in 2018. So they're showing their confidence in those guys by not drafting anyone. They pointed to Michael Capiniero, who they signed as a vet option. I'm not sure he makes any impact as a receiver this year. So if he's somebody they're counting on a lot this season, Titans are going to be in trouble. That's my take. So I think they need a big boost from their receiving core. They'll bring in some UDFAs that play receiver and they'll compete. Maybe one makes the roster. Maybe they bring in a receiver later in camp, but I think their core is their core, and they're going with the guys they've got. So that might end up being a position where midway through the season we say it ends up being the weak point that we thought it was, or we look back and say, oh man, Corey Davis and Taywan Taylor had a big jump, and now we're not worried about this position at all. So I think the Titans are hoping for the latter. I'm sort of in the waiting see stand. I think Corey Davis can be a really good player. I think Taywan Taylor can be a good player, but they've got to show it. But the new scheme should help them. So that's my take on the receiving core. And I think it'll be one of the question marks we'll follow all the way through training camp. UDFA options, look for local guys, guys from Tennessee State, guys from Middle Tennessee State, guys from Vanderbilt. I know Trey Herndon from Vandy is a guy that they like. Ralph Webb from Vandy. I know Richie James got picked up from Middle Tennessee State. Look for local guys. Those are the first guys. And then look for guys at positions where they didn't draft. They didn't draft any interior offensive linemen. They didn't draft any offensive linemen at all for the first time since 2012. So I expect them to target, a few guys there. That's a selling point. If you're a UDFA, you want to go a place where they didn't draft your position. The Titans only drafted 4 players. A lot of positions are open. A lot of offensive and defensive linemen are going to look at this situation and say, I can make a team there because they didn't draft anyone. So I'd look at positions they didn't draft, offensive and defensive linemen, and then local guys like the few I mentioned. So that's sort of what I take there. Maybe they look at a punter. I think they're happy with Brett Kern coming off off a Pro Bowl season though, so I wouldn't think any UDFA is going to take his job. Tavon's cheap because he's expensive. That's how it works. If you cost a lot of money, then you're cheap to trade for. I don't think that John Robinson inquired on him. So yeah, thanks guys. This was fun. We will chat soon and enjoy your Saturdays.